Hi, and welcome to the Writer's Desk. My name is Lisa Soland, and I am your host at the Writer's Desk, and I'm here today with writer Jeff Gordon, and we're going to be discussing his new book on Lynn Barry, and it's called FOXY Lady, the Authorized Biography of Lynn Barry.
Yes.
Explain to us the difference between an authorized biography and just a regular biography.
First of all, thank you, Lisa, for having me here today. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. The difference between an authorized biography and a regular biography is this. An authorized biography is done with the willing participation of the subject and or their family. An unauthorized biography could be a person who's long deceased, their relatives are nowhere in existence. It could be done without the cooperation of the family members or the subject. It could be a tell-all, where generally the people who chime in and give interviews for it have a vendetta against the subject.
It's a much greater benefit to have the support of the actual person, ideally, but also the family, and you had both.
Yes, I had both. Well, that is, you hit the nail on the head there. I had the support of Lynn Barry for this project, and once I had that, that gave me entree to her friends, her family, professional associates or co-stars, because when I would send out query letters, I would make mention that this is an authorized biography, and if there was a comment that Lynn made about any of the people to whom I was sending out these letters, I would include it, and they got back to me automatically. Whereas if it was, oh, I'm writing a biography on Lynn Barry, could you help me out? I don't think I would have had like Oscar-winning actors like Clara Trevor and Anthony Quinn responding to me right away. And they did, so I was very grateful. My first round with this book was interviewing Lynn Barry, and an article for a film journal turned into a book very quickly. Lynn and I were going to do 2 interviews for this purpose, but during the first, our first discussion, she was extremely forthcoming about her childhood, something disturbing that happened in Virginia with regard to her family, and then something that happened to her father, and one thing led to another, and by the end of this first interview, we'd barely gotten to the first of her 150 movies when she was 13 years old. And I thought, an incredible life, that this had the makings of a book. So the second interview, I approached her with the idea, it turned into a book. Unfortunately, FOXY Lady, the authorized biography of Lynn Barry, unfortunately, Lynn died unexpectedly just weeks after our last interview.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes, it was very interesting. It was very devastating to me, of course, to her family. I was quite lost as to what to do with this project. I sort of ambled my way through sort of clumsily a couple of drafts, put it down for a year, and then the thought occurred to me when I started sending it out again and a publisher said, well, you know, we would consider this, but what about interviewing some of the people whom she worked with? So then I started sending out query letters to Lynn's co-workers, a lot of former movie stars, television stars, some who are, you know, still active, like Roddy McDowell. And
I was going to ask you about him. I've heard stories that he is just a wonderful...
He was a wonderful...
Was he one of your strongest?
Yes, because he had a very sharp, incisive mind. He had a take on Hollywood and the acting profession like nobody else I ever knew. He enlightened me to why certain reasons why Lynn's studio, Fox, hence the title FOXY Lady, she was under contract to them for 14 years, longer than anyone else, why Lynn's studio did not serve her well in their casting. They frequently cast her in the big A films as another woman or a villainess or a femme fatale, and that was not the studio where that type of role should be played. But he brought insight to that. He also brought insight to Lynn as a character, as her own personal character, that she was warm and she was funny and she was giving and she was wonderful to children. He had just done How Green Was My Valley. He played Hugh in that, and he was only about 13 years old at the time, and how Lynn really took to him. Lynn loved children. I interviewed a number of other child actors who said that unlike a lot of the girl stars of that era, that Lynn just was not snotty at all, and, you know, socialized with the kids off the set.
How many people did you interview outside the family?
Outside? Dozens. As a matter of fact, once the book came out, I realized I left it. Sorry, wherever you are, June Havoc. Sorry, Donald O'Connor. I forgot to include you. There are a number of people. I have boxes and boxes of research and papers and transcriptions.
But you have to, as a writer, you have to yell uncle at one point, right?
Exactly.
You have to stop and wind it up.
Yes, you're absolutely right there, because I was very grateful through a friend of mine who was an autograph collector, my friend David Schoblin. He provided me with tons of autographs for people with whom Lynn worked. Then I came into contact with Lynn's sister-in-law, Eugenie, who turned me on to a number of Lynn's family members, childhood friends, back to her days in Roanoke, Virginia, when they first arrived in Hollywood, when Lynn's mother was married to a very famous Hollywood preacher at that point, Reverend Robert H. Bitzer, who was the head of the Hollywood Institute of Religious Sciences.
Church of Religious Sciences,
Churches, exactly, up until
started
1994.
By Ernest Holmes.
Whom he knew very well. And if it wasn't for Ernest Holmes, Lynn would not have become Lynn Barry. She was Marjorie Fisher, a.k.a. Peggy Fisher, from Roanoke, Virginia, and then moved to Lynchburg in Boston. So Eugenie got me in touch with many people, and one thing led to another, and I did actually come into contact with Reverend Bitzer. But as you said, it got to the point that it was voluminous. I mean, in order to write this book, I had to do an immense amount of research. I can't even tell you, folks. And I had to do the right kind of research, and not
specific.
Yeah, specific from good sources. And folks, please be aware, on the internet, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So you've got to trust your sources and know that they're...
And get them yourself.
Get them yourself, exactly. And if it means going into clipping files, into vaults, into archives, do it. When writing an autobiography, there are a lot of universities that have oral histories, that have collections that people bequeath, or get in touch with their family members or friends or agents or whatever.
I appreciate you talking to the writers out there, because we do have a writer following. But before we get into the specifics of you approaching this as a writer,
absolutely,
tell us briefly about the book. I mean, I can give an overall that, she had a tough childhood. She had some mother issues. She ended up having 3 marriages and 1 child, right?
One child survived her, yes.
And all throughout that was this mother pushing her into show business, and she made 150 films, made her way into 1950s television.
Right, she was a pioneer in TV, had 2 television series.
Tell us, what we don't know.
Well, what you would not know is that Lynn stands out, besides her voluminous amount of work, in the showbiz world, by virtue of the fact that many people come to Hollywood or to Broadway or even to regional theater who have the talent, who have the looks, but just do not have the opportunity to ascend to major stardom. Lynn had all of that, and she did have the opportunities, which is the odd thing about her career.
Makes all the difference.
It makes all the difference. She did have the opportunities, but she never ascended to the point of superstardom. And I felt it improper to ask her about this, because it was none of my business. Why didn't you become a bigger star? But in that very first interview, when it was going to be an article just about her movie work, because this woman did the A to Z of pictures, which I'll mention in 1 second, because that's the other facet to Foxy Lady. She was so forthcoming about her life and the problems with the family, the mother, the alcoholic mother who pushed her into stardom, her turbulent marriages, first to Walter Kane, who was an agent who turned out to procure women for Howard Hughes. She didn't know that at the moment. Her second...
How could you know that?
Yeah, exactly.
How can you know
I know, and she was only
this?
19 when she married him to get away from the mother. Her second husband was the notorious Sid Luft, who was a major hanger-on in Hollywood.
Married Judy Garland.
He married the day after he divorced Lynn. Lynn divorced him the day after. And then her third husband was Beverly Hills' psychiatrist to the stars, Nathan Rickles, who alternately, like her mother, sang Lynn's praises and abused her, while Lynn was guest starring on all these TV shows. She was also working in the man's office and used her. Mm-hmm. And she also Lynn developed her own alcoholic traits and whatnot, and became a full-blown alcoholic by the 60s, and it made it possible for her to work in the 70s. So there is a very wrenching, interesting, fascinating story by somebody who's very brutally honest about herself and about situations in her life.